Indonesian streaming platform Vidio has just showcased 9 original productions for 2026. Some are already streaming, others land later this year. The headline here isn't the number, it's the spread. You've got crime and action, romance, high school, and coming of age, along with comedy. There's arranged marriage, religion, and other recognizable social realities in Indonesia. There's even a hint of horror. It's not the deep, dark, blood-soaked kind. That's not really Video's lane, but it's enough to show they're willing to test the edges. One return worth highlighting is Bad Guys, originally adapted from Korean IP, now back with a newly expanded storyline developed by Base Entertainment. So Base is one of the 4 production houses that are involved in the 2026 slate. The others are Screenplay Films, Miles Films, I call it Miles, I'm told it's Miles, and Amadeus Cinemagna. So all these are names we'll hopefully be talking to over the next few months. And the 2026 slate all lands on the back of a pretty stellar quarter for Vidio, which is the last quarter of 2025. The platform finished second only to Netflix in Southeast Asia. The engagement data, which you're expecting in full in the next few days, points to a content strategy that's designed with specific intent. So Patrick and I spoke to the architect of that strategy ahead of Friday's showcase. So let's get into how you build a slate that wins at home and still scales. This is To The Point, your briefing on Asia's entertainment business. I'm Janine Stein.
And I'm Patrick Frater.
And if it's happening in content, streaming, cinema, or corporate chaos, we're talking about it.
So let's get to it. Today's guest is Mark Francis, the Chief Content and Strategy Officer of Indonesian streaming platform Vidio. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, guys. It's great to be here. Thank you.
I think that you probably don't need an introduction, and you're certainly not going to thank me for saying this, but a few years ago, you famously talked about production as a sausage factory, and you're also behind what could be seen as quite radical additions to Video slate, including, forgive my pronunciation, Pertaruhan the series, Scandal 3, the final and sexiest, which is pretty unusual for Indonesia, and Jalinan Terlarang, which again I'm mangling, but you know which one I'm talking about. I'm going to kick off with a few stats that were from 2025 that Vidio released, I think either around Christmas or the beginning of the year. And then we can talk about sausage factories and how you've changed it. So Video's total watch time increased by 34% year on year in 2025, and the average watch duration was up 22%. Female viewer growth was particularly spectacular, up 31%, and total watch duration up 39%. Male viewers, which were a core demo for you, were up 6%, which is still large in this environment. But I mean, compared to the women and the Gen Z, it's not a lot. Watch duration for men was up 24%. So obviously something happened there. Gen Z was the standout segment. Viewers under 17 were up 70%, 78%, and 145% growth in duration. 18 to 24 also made quite a significant contribution. Up 65%, total watch time up 190%. So is there a simple way to explain what you did here?
Not in one sentence.
2 sentences?
I'll do my best. So all those stats are remarkable. We're very grateful that we had a fantastic year. I think on some of the major shifts in segments that traditionally we weren't as strong in before, quite a bit of that is tied to, ironically, the thing that I was saying back in, I can't remember, it was 2017 or 2018, with reference to the sausage factory. So it turns out that the sausage factory, in its new iteration, does serve still very large audience bases. That comment was made in the context of how streaming at the time had to create meaningful differentiation from FTA, which free-to-air television, which was by design a bit of a factory. But as it happens, what we're building at Vidio is more of an ecosystem which allows lovers and of all local content to watch on video, and that can mean free-to-air television, because it's still the habit or the format of the soap still serves a large base. So what changed for us is we started innovating as to how to get people who watch free-to-air television behind the paywall. And we launched a few products, like we charge for catch-up now. So if you can still watch your free-to-air show live on linear or on the app for free live, but right after the broadcast, we hold the 24 hours back and we charge customers a small subscription fee to come in through. Now that behavior is strategic because you want to build and move more of the base into paid who wouldn't traditionally pay for top-end streaming services. And that is where a lot of the big shifts in, not all of it, but some of it is coming from. Because there were a couple of very, very successful, this is the other thing, right? You can have a very successful sausage and it can go for a very long time, and that can build and bring, a cohort of audience that you wouldn't traditionally touch. Now, they wouldn't necessarily pay full fare for the monthly sub, but by charging for on demand, you get them behind the paywall, and those numbers start to count and matter towards. Now, once they're in, then I can start to introduce them to other formats. And because the long and short of it is, if you really zoom out, I think we have to remember that in a market like Indonesia, prior to streaming, pay TV never really took off. So the only form of local entertainment, film and video, that people paid for was box office, right? So all of this stuff, these local series that we make, the 8-part, the Jalanan Telarangs that you mentioned, prior to streaming simply didn't exist anyway, right? So whilst we build a market there to capture the top end, we are trying to bring our own audience in an ecosystem that we technically are vertically integrated with, right? With SHTV channel and Indonesia and Moji and others. So I think broadly, we started looking at it, and I'm certainly championing this, as I have this phrase called destination local. So while video has many identities that were associated with certain IP and shows, I think of us more as a destination, right? For if you have a preference for local language content, how do we serve you in the most comprehensive and complete way possible?
I missed out in my laundry list of stats that around 60% of watch duration was driven by Indonesian films, and Indonesian films, as I think I know, are enjoying a high moment. So, and the more than 87% of consumption originates from sports. We'll talk about sports later, but talk to me about the films.
I should clarify that stat slightly. It's directionally true, but I think it's more accurate to say that's more than 70% of meaningful engagement came from local IP. That includes the video original series. That includes Indonesian films was a category that video wasn't really competing for until, I'd say, about a year ago, or maybe 14 months ago. So that led to growth in local engagement, because it was a format that, whilst we had library films, we never had more recent Indonesian films. But combined, everything local basically moved the needle in the premium needle, because all the numbers you mentioned are our subscriber stats, not necessarily the free stats. So what's managed to move the needle in engagement and subscription revenue is primarily local, which is a good thing, because it gives us a reason to exist.
How are you acquiring films, and what's your priority on the film side?
Good question. I don't have one approach necessarily. I think it's no secret that Netflix has done a very good job at cornering large segments of the bigger studios, and through a form of output deal. I remember it wasn't just a few years ago that all the global guys were warring over output deals from all the major studios. That's not the case anymore, but there's still a scarcity of, on balance, and Patrick knows this way better than I do. He'll know that there were, I think, close to, 270 odd movies or more produced in Indonesia last year. But the ones that really matter, you're probably talking about 50. And I don't mean that the rest aren't good films. I just mean commercially viable films that have made a certain amount of box office plus secured additional revenue streams to make that sustainable. There's still very, very good films outside that, but they may not have caught that. Now, those films that largely come from the majors are, competed for by Netflix and sometimes under these legacy deals. So I've had to be a little bit more tactical. So in some cases, we've effectively co-produced a film and invested in the film, taken equity. One great example is Mira Lesmana's Rangga and Cinta musical. There's a top IP that is rebooted as a musical. I could not have competed dollar for dollar necessarily with Netflix, nor do I think that's a good idea to inflate prices that way. But what we did do is, with the backing of the company, we invested and took the risk on the front end, and also supported her promotions with our free-to-air channel distribution. And for an IP like that wants to hit the middle and mass, you put those three things together and suddenly you have a way to compete against pure dollars. And so that's one example. It's risky because you can also lose twice if the film doesn't work out in box office. So that is really a selective tool that we have. So we have to do our research, know the filmmaker, believe in the project, think it's right for who we want to be. And then also we've been buying indie films, or maybe not sort of top mainstream, but actually they're quality films that just didn't necessarily have the marketing dollars perhaps, or the timing was off, so it didn't really translate into big box office. And we try to make a good home for those films. And the trade-off is that because we're more selective about films, you can see them on our service for longer. So it's a combination of things, I'd say.
I have a question here specifically about the films on your platform. Do you get a different holdback period for films in which you invest compared with those you acquire?
No, we respect I actually don't know if it's written down anywhere, but everybody says it's 120 days. So we respect that holdback. We never really challenged it.
I also have a more general question about the film and streaming industries in Indonesia. In many countries, we've seen cinema slow down, and there's essentially been a trade-off. As streaming has grown, theatrical cinema has declined. It's not a straight line effect, obviously, but that's been the rough trend. Indonesia is a notable exception to that. Both streaming and theatrical cinema have grown. So my question, I guess, is: are they complementary? Is this going to continue, or is there some other analysis which I haven't worked out yet?
I think it's a very hard question. It's a very good question. I see, for instance, just looking at this, there are a lot of films made, but they're struggling for time on screen. But you zoom out and you look, wow, the amount of output is growing, so that's got to be healthy. On the other hand, I think if you look at the success ratio of the total output, it might suggest that, hey, that might point to, for instance, a lack of screens, right? So we don't really fundamentally know. Now, the difference of opinion, I think there probably is a lack of screens, but I don't know if it's going to make a 50% difference in what's happening or a 10% difference in what's happening. Then there's the question of streaming. And, prior to, I don't do that many first run films at the moment. Probably less than 20, about 15 we launched last year. Whereas I think the number with Netflix is much higher. So the question on that cannibalizing some degree of cinema audience, they might be cannibalizing. So both statements are true, Patrick. It might be cannibalizing some segments of cinema goers, while other segments of cinema goers are growing. And that's why I said it was a tough question to answer. But broadly speaking, I think it's a pretty promising, but you have to walk gingerly through it. It's not easy to get out of all the films, the ones that can break even. It's tough.
I want to ask you a question about acquisition. So you've had some success with Turkish drama experimentation, and also the kind of elephant in the room, given what's going on in Korea, your relationship with Korean drama rights.
Yeah, but I think the context is like the analogy I always use is that streaming is like an all-you-can-eat buffet, and it's not, at least especially the freemium ones. And in the all-you-can-eat buffet, whilst you need to have your lobsters and your steaks, you still need your side dishes. You still need your potatoes and your rice. So for me, programming is about getting the mix right. It's never necessarily about one thing. So with licensing acquisition, what does that serve in the mix? And Korean series in particular have been excellent at driving regular engagement out of large enough segments of users at relatively low price. So it's giving me efficiency. It isn't necessarily giving me like first title views or subscribers, but it's like the potatoes in the buffet. But the segments are quite different. So we've got some Mandarin series, we've tried that. Turns out to be a slightly different segment to the Korean ones, who are bigger. And then we also do Hollywood. So what I'm saying is our acquisition strategy is realistic and tactical and efficient. So my Hollywood movies do very, very well because they're adjacent to the needs of our football fans, who are a very large cohort. And I don't necessarily try to win any awards for Hollywood filmmaking. It's not relevant. I'm serving a unique segment of Hollywood watchers, unless I intentionally want to grow that. Now, this is where Turkish comes in. The Turkish experiment was actually inspired by me thinking about the soap opera and the Cinetron and what might be an elevated form of that. So elevated in terms of production value. It's not really the pure local soap, but it's a soap, right? And there are not many examples of that. And so I decided to try Turkish, but the key to this is working with the FTA group, meaning there are not many types of content where we can toggle between free to air and work for that broad audience and streaming. It's hard. Indonesian movies are one in some of our original series, but by and large, there's still a gulf between the watchers of video original series and the hundreds and hundreds of thousands who are watching a soap every night. So it was an experiment to see if we could launch Turkish into that midstream between. I'm always looking for that staircase between free and paid. What kind of formats do that? And so it was tough to calibrate, but yeah, I mean, it was to see is there a demand in a segment for that show, and there was. So we're going to try to scale that meaningfully and keep working together with FTA, because the content seems to work for both types of user, paid and free to some extent. It's not a massive segment.
Can I interrupt and say what do you find attractive about Turkish TV content?
It's relative. So if I look at compared to telenovelas or Filipino soaps or Thai TV, I felt there were characters and worlds and themes that were probably a little bit more adjacent to the Indonesian market, but was also differentiated enough from the local. So the first one we did was called Kuma, and it touched upon themes of arranged relationships and how confronting that can be. It wasn't religious, but it's obviously set within the context of Islam as well. So there was a sort of familiarity there as well in the subtext. And so I felt it was, and also Turkish, I think, used to have its run in Indonesia back in the day, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And then it just sort of went away, which didn't really make sense to me, right? How come it worked and then it suddenly went away? I think what happened is a run on the content, making the rights too expensive to be sustainable, and then it went away. So I think, again, I have to try to find these segments of users where I find longer running formats that can give me back the efficiency. Because, between Indonesian movies and video original series, even though we produce 12 to 14 series a year, it's hard to see me making that number 20 or 30 and doing it well. So that's the purpose these other formats serve.
Korean series, the price has soared. The local market is pretty much still in the doldrums, and they're bringing in more and more international budgets because they just can't do them by themselves anymore. So it's now becoming a really global, with US involvement.
Yeah.
Does that take it out of your?
Yeah, massively, massive. I don't want. I mean, that has impact. I kind of knew it was coming, but I did obviously. I think, and I don't know how much of this is talked about, but I mean, it's no secret that the CJ TVing HBO deal would have locked up quite a bit of content through that partnership through exclusivity, and I think then what's happened is the leftover exclusivity from the other majors, being SBS, KBS, NBC, starts to get more valuable to other global players, and what's left behind is anything that they didn't lock up on a global level. And like you said, I think that's the other factor is that the Koreans themselves are struggling to scale production because of cost. So that, I think, has led to this scarcity from the majors. Now, if anyone who buys Korean on a non-exclusive basis, people like myself, won't necessarily have as many options as we did before. And so in sort of partly forecasting that, I sort of started to look around for what else, how else could I get those minutes at scale? Is it Mandarin? Is it Thai content? Is it Japanese? How would I curate that? Because sometimes for me, I have to kind of bring the customer and the audience with me into these new areas. I can't sort of pivot overnight.
Where are you with Thai, Singapore, Malaysian content? I mean, that's a possibility.
Yeah, I haven't. Firstly, I don't think of it by country. Meaning, I don't think there's an Indonesian audience sitting around going, I fancy me some Thai, or I fancy me some Japanese show. I don't think that's the way in to it. It is the way in for foreign film, potentially. Right? Oh, I love Italian cinema. But that's not, it tends to become, like in Thai, a lot of people talk about it being all about BL, for instance. Right? Boy love content. Is it Thai or is it, am I going because it's boy love, or is it because I love the sound of Thai? So those are different things, is what I'm saying. So I look, the Korean content took 10, 20 years to develop into, to sink its teeth into that YA audience that we have here. I think I'd be naive to think I can replace the performance of 20 to 25 Korean series overnight with another category. It might be a combination of things that I have to do to achieve that. Mandarin series can work, but Mandarin means a lot of different things as well, depending on where that show has gone, who it's built for. We did a show called Flourished Peony, which was a really nice romance that did pretty well for us. Equally, we did another show that didn't do well for us and didn't resonate with the audiences. So, yeah, I don't know. Our experience with Thai content has been also kind of hit and miss. People are selective, in what they want to watch. And the thing about soaps is they really have to catch. They have to catch because you're asking people to watch it every other day.
Talking about things that are catching, what about microdramas?
Yeah,
I mean,
I think
you were talking about those.
Yeah, we have made initial forays into microdrama, but I still think we're in a test and learn phase. We understand it can't be ignored, but how we do it that makes most sense for us uniquely as a group, with a Cinetron or soap opera adjacent audience, with a lot of people using us on mobile. Like, what's our answer to microdrama? We certainly don't want to copy everybody else's playbook. We don't want to go up against, something like Malolo. It's pointless. So we're finding our way through combination of producing original microdramas and testing different SKUs and how we sell them, discussing partnerships. I do believe there is a growing market for vertical like content that's optimized for vertical, and in that world, microdrama will possibly replace some of the minutes from long form entertainment on mobile. But within this group, we have Cinetron producers, soap opera actors, talking about the kinds of themes that are very, very adjacent to microdrama.
Yeah.
So we got to figure out how to do that for that customer base, basically. And I don't know. I mean, we're on the way, I think.
Mark, I wonder if I could ask you a slightly macro question, which is kind of a response to both of your last points. There are Chinese-owned streaming platforms who have clearly targeted Indonesia as one of their growth markets. Does the growth of Mandarin content give them an advantage? I would assume the answer to that is yes. But also, are they able to package that with microdramas, China being the epicenter of the microdrama industry? And does that give them a significant competitive edge in Indonesia against more established platforms like yours?
I don't want to speak too much on my esteemed competitors' strategies and what they say as, this is good enough. What I see is that by nature of customer segment, they're quite their audience is more mobile first, right? So I think they have heavier use, they have heavier appeal and heavier marketing towards the mobile segment. That's very big in Indonesia. But the behavior and engagement and propensity to pay is very different from the CTV, from the household user, where you get, I think most premium SVOD, like certainly the Disneys and Netflix would be sort of CTV mindset, smart TV mindset, as opposed to mobile first. On the one hand, if they're mobile first customers, it would suggest that when they get into microdrama, there is an adjacency with that audience to have for long form. So in that sense, in theory, I agree, there's that adjacency there. Will that customer pay them the monthly subscription rates or whatever the sachet pricing for that to scale from a revenue perspective? I don't know. But the other thing about the Mandarin content is it's very freemium, meaning they toggle free and SVOD quite heavily. And at least last time I looked, I mean, they are making some local productions, but it does mean to get that broad audience for Mandarin, I think there's quite a lot of stuff that is made relatively available for free on AVOD. Now, if that shifts for them and they need to go SVOD, I think it remains to be seen if those numbers will start behaving like the monthly subscribers you need to have and the kind of regular engagement you need to have to not churn, right? So it's a different segment and audience behavior tied to those kinds of formats. So I don't know, but when you ask them, let me know.
Can I promised to come back to sports, so can I close this out unless there's something urgent that you didn't mention? But sports has quite often driven most of Vidio's performance. And I know there was an attempt a few years ago to say, okay, how can we be less dependent on sports? Do you think you've succeeded? And I mean, it would appear to me that you have by the rise in female and Gen Z. But do you think sports will continue to drive that male audience?
So there's different effects, right? So firstly, sports is slightly, actually not that massive, is as a reason to subscribe to pay. It leads as a category, like sports converts people. But it's entertainment that keeps them. The engagement's coming from entertainment. I mean, logically, if you watch a live football match in 90 minutes, it's not the same thing as committing to an 8-part series or movies or coming back for the news or TV. I think what I meant by not depending on sports so much is I wanted entertainment to stand on its own feet, to bring in the kind of numbers and behavior that could, not need to be subsidized so much by the sports subscriber. It's great that entertainment helps the sports subscriber and keeps them longer. But I also want entertainment's economics to work for itself, right? And so I think that has been very successful. In fact, on some metrics, entertainment even exceeded sports in my last year's performance. But we're happy to have sports. I am, because it's, when you bring in a big funnel, you can do a lot of things with them. Getting them through the door converting them can be quite tough. Yeah.
I mean, there was something that I didn't mention it because it just was like a laundry list of statistics and they were all in the plus category. But one of the combat pay-per-view was 116% increase in pay-per-view transactions last year compared to 2024. Yeah. And then there was the combat showbiz.
Beyond,
with 500. Well, I've got the statistics. I'll just read it. 536,000 pay-per-view transactions and more than 1.7 million viewers.
Obviously, very healthy proof of concept, but it's pay-per-view.
Yeah.
This is the equivalent of our Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul thing. So again, different segment of user behavior, but the question is, can I bring them over? Will they want what else I've got? Like if this converts them, now I can't keep everyone, but if you can bring in 500,000 subscribers with one pay-per-view event and grant them a longer time in the service, keeping 10% of that is very meaningful over time. So it's been quite the revelation for us, pay-per-view combat. Now, we've tried other things. We tried Miss Universe pay-per-view,
and
the scandalous Miss Universe. I think it was difficult. The timing, it wasn't a huge number, but we were doing it for the learnings. Basically, we needed to understand how do you even do this, right? How do people behave? It wasn't exactly we absolutely need to go do beauty competitions from this point on. We've done stand-up comedy pay-per-view as well, which actually we also didn't know whether that would work and how scalable it is. So we'll keep trying, and we have committed to building out combat sports. You'll also know we signed a deal with UFC, so we now have UFC available on video as well. So one of the challenges of Indonesia, everybody talks about it being such a big market, which it is, but sometimes they're just segments of audiences which have to be served. Like I go back to the analogy of the buffet. What if you have too many customers who only like one dish in the buffet? How long can you keep serving them that one thing? So I'm trying to build shows and content and experiences that complement each other, that are adjacent to each other, so that they can come and enjoy a spread rather than a very, very hyper-targeted. And that's the thing, before I arrived at video, I think a lot of the programming, whilst it made sense, it was almost too segmented. Right. So I think the growth comes almost by going this way rather than this way sometimes, The story behind the hit shows of last year is not obvious from just, here's another video original series. So there's a bit of what's going on behind the scenes, which I would say I was very, very conscious and targeted about what each show was meant to be or do. Jalanan Telarang was an elevated soap opera. It was infidelity, but I purposely pulled the characters down to be suburban rather than urban. I cast a very mainstream actress in the lead, and I didn't go for the sexy usual screenplay, edgy, compete with Netflix one, and it just did amazing numbers. Sugar Baby is the other show that you'll find out soon enough. It's the most watched show on video in 60 days in the history of video. It's a sexy comedy, but it's a sexy comedy with a story. And it not only got the most watched numbers, it actually had people staying longer, and it got female watchers, even though...
Just tell me quickly, what Sugar Baby is about, the young girl and the old man? Or did I get that wrong?
Well, one of the unfortunate realities of living in economically disparate places like Indonesia is that it's very mainstream to have sugar babies, which is younger women who have to have relationships with older, richer men in order to get by. And so this phenomenon, they're all these sort of sugar babies, right? So it's a dramedy about a loser of a driver who has a boss who's very rich, and one day he decides to pretend to be the boss. Borrows his watch and pretends to be that guy, and then he kind of has his own problems with his marriage, so he falls for the sugar baby. So you get to understand how the sugar babies work, and it's comedic, but it talks about other issues as well. So it's a light comedy. It's not like Open Bail. Open Bail is very crude. It's very like The Hangover, right? This is a bit more neutral, right? And I can't prove it for certain, but I like to believe it drew a broader audience, which explains why it's the most watched show on video ever.
Did you get into trouble for these?
Not yet. Not yet. But I try not to. I don't deliberately go looking for trouble, but I don't avoid it or the possibility of trouble.
Got it. Patrick, is there anything else you want to ask?
I've been fascinated by Mark's responses, particularly about the scale and shape of the market. I mean, you're right, people tend to overgeneralize about Indonesia as a market. But also, I love to hear your strategies. I think you called it a staircase, getting people to move from one tier to another. That's obviously a huge thing in the streaming sector.
I think the painting these markets with a broad brush, it's something I used to do myself, sitting in KL in the iFlix days when we were trying to figure out these markets. This is a fascinating place that even Jakartans don't understand. I mean, there are more than 20,000 islands. So.
Well, I'm going to say thank you, Mark, for joining us. It has been fascinating. And thank you to our audience for watching. This has been To The Point with me, Patrick Frater, and
Me, Janine Stein.
see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.